Myth number one, slavery doesn't exist anymore. Myth number two, human trafficking is an overseas problem. Myth number three, major brands don't use slave labor. Myth number four, all traffickers are men. Myth number five, all trafficking victims are women. Myth number six, human trafficking only happens in impoverished communities. Myth number seven, all human trafficking victims are kidnapped and isolated. Myth number eight, human smuggling and human trafficking are the same. Myth number nine, victims and traffickers are usually strangers. Myth number 10, rescue brings immediate relief for survivors. Myth number 11, the best way to fight trafficking is to take victims from the situation. Myth number 12, all traffickers are willing participants in the crime. Myth number 13, human trafficking is such an overwhelming issue, there's nothing that I can do about it. My name is Doriel and I am the host of the Lot Carey Wise Digital Couch Conversation. And tonight we are going to be discussing human trafficking. Please welcome to our conversation our Executive Secretary Treasurer, the Reverend Emmett L. Dunn, on behalf of the leadership of Lot Carey, which is Reverend Dr. Gina M. Stewart, who is our president, Reverend Emmett Dunn, who will be on our conversation tonight, Reverend Jesse T. Williams, the first vice president, Reverend Dr. James E. Victor, the second vice president, Reverend Dr. Angelita Clifton, who is the president of the Women in Service Everywhere, Reverend Dr. Brenda McBurrow, the first vice president, Sister Lynette Richardson, the second vice president, Brother Gabriel, who is the leader of Men on Missions, and Reverend Brittany Mingo, who is the leader of the IYD. We welcome you tonight.
Thank you. And again, it's a pleasure to be on your couch, and I hope that the conversation will energize those persons who are listening in on it to join the fight against what I consider to be a very, very serious crime against humanity.
Excellent. So before we get into the conversation tonight, there are some announcements, let's call them church announcements, for the Lot Carey Convention. And that is on this being Maundy, Thursday. And so this is one of the holiest seasons of our Christian calendar. On Resurrection Monday at 12 noon in Washington, D.C., and at 7 p.m. in the Virginia area, there will be a Resurrection Monday service. And you can find the information on LotCarey.org. LotCarey.org. Second is April 15th. It is not just tax day, but it is a day that the website will be open for us to register for our 126th annual session. So please go to LotCarey.org on April 15th and start getting your rooms and register early. Don't be left out. Lastly, we will be having our 126th annual session in Greensboro, North Carolina. Please join us from August 14th to the 17th in celebration and in remembrance and in honoring and celebrating the work that we do, the partners that we work with, and the missions that we call our own. Now let's get into our conversation. Thank you so much, Reverend Dunn, for being a part of our conversation this evening. We're going to be discussing the very, very tender topic of anti-human trafficking. If you missed our monthly prayer call, Reverend Dunn was the leader on that day, and he referenced a website called Exodus Road. And if anybody is aware of that, if you are in the space of discussing anti-human trafficking, yes, it is Thursdays in Black. So he and I are in Black, of course. This is to bring awareness for gender-based violence, to bring awareness for it, and with this focus on anti-human trafficking. And so thank you so much for donning the colors, and let's get into this conversation. So let's first describe human trafficking. It occurs when someone is compelled into service. Individuals may be compelled through force, fraud, coercion, or because of their age. Traffickers often target individuals based on their vulnerabilities, which could include, but not limited to, age, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, culture, immigration status, housing, or housing instability. However, anyone can become a victim of human trafficking. Here's the first question. How is human trafficking different from smuggling immigrants?
Oh, thanks for the question, and again, thanks for having me to dialogue with you on this issue. Um, Smuggling people into any other country, but since we are familiar with um, our brothers and sisters from primarily Latin America and Central America trying to enter these United States, we're very familiar with the southern border, as we always refer to that entry point into the U.S. Um, there are persons who would pay to be smuggled into another country. So smuggling people into the States is not always by force. There are people who, trying to seek a better lifestyle, will actually seek out smugglers to help them enter into the US. But there are also instances of false smuggling that goes on, similar to human trafficking. But the whole idea of smuggling people across borders for the purpose of immigration is not always considered human trafficking, because some of those persons who are smuggled are voluntarily pay for that so-called service, whereas human trafficking is always against the will of the individual, always against the will of the individual.
Thank you. So now, why is it important to know this difference? And thank you to the people who are acting as our stream team tonight. And so those people who are commenting, or if you want to ask questions, if you want to raise issues, if you want to make any connections, please drop them in the chat. If you'd love for us to shout out your name, not a problem. Just click that blue link, and we will do so. So, and then of course we will also pull up the comments like this one to the broadcast. So if those of you who are the myths that I mentioned at the genesis of this conversation come from the Exodus Road. So if you look at exodusroad.com, you will see those myths, and then also explanations of each of those myths and the debunking of those myths. Thank you very much. So now, why is it important to know the difference? So sex trafficking is one form of human trafficking, and there are many other forms of human trafficking that can include sex trafficking or labor trafficking, which includes forced labor and domestic servitude, organ trafficking, forced marriage, exploitation of children for labor, sex, and warfare. Using the term sex trafficking when we're talking about human trafficking makes victims of other forms of trafficking invisible. So how is human trafficking? Well, yeah, like why is it important to know this difference?
I think it's important for the very reasons you just mentioned, that people tend to focus only on one aspect of the problem. And whenever you do, like in every aspect of our lives, if you focus only on one thing, something else tend to fall through the cracks. And I think we emphasize uh, sexual trafficking because of, one, is the most prevalent of trafficking, and two, I think it hit home harder than anything else because we're dealing with our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, and we tend to elevate it over others. But I think all trafficking is, first of all, is inhumane. It causes trauma in those persons that are victimized by this, and understanding the total uh, uh, um, trade, because it's actually is a trade. Understand the total trade would then open your eyes to other forms, because if you're only looking at uh, persons who are trafficked for sexual reason, number one, you tend to pay attention only to one gender.
Yes.
That's one of the downside to looking at it from uh, a sexual orientation standpoint. That you tend to pay attention to one gender, and then forget about um, the the male gender that also
Yes.
fall victim to human trafficking, especially in warfare, where child soldiers are used to engage in violence against others,
To
and
fill the lines.
that's where you find a lot of young boys being conscripted against their will to fight, for a cause that they know nothing about, without any compensation. Not
Correct.
that fight is a good thing anyway, but that's just the reality. So paying attention to only, you know, a sector of this inhumane act tend to allow others to keep the trade going without being noticed or arrested or even, pay for the crimes.
You're right. You're right. As a matter of fact, you made mention that it impacts the life of that person. In actuality, it becomes a generational, if we want to use this term, a generational curse. Because yes, it does impact that person where they are, but then as that person grows, and if they as they do grow their own family, or they participate in the in families that are around them, they take some of that hurt and that trauma with them, and then their reactions and responses to other people are impacted by the trauma that they have felt and experienced. So
Let me just let's just push that point just a little further,
yes.
because in certain cultures, even though especially as it relates to women, girls and women, even though they were not party to their uh, uh, enslavement, if for any reason they are liberated, all right, and return to their community, they are
Yes.
not received,
Yes.
because the stigma of having been abused is not something that certain cultures see as clean or wholesome or want to be identified with. So
Correct.
for some of these young women, because they know that, and here's the sad part, because they know that, sometimes they become what I call a willing victim,
Hmm.
because for them, they rather stay in that context than to go back to the community and be treated as third, fourth, fifth class citizen, or even be rejected. Because in certain cultures, especially if they are of the Islamic fundamentalist culture, they are considered dead.
Hmm.
And so for them, going back home will not benefit them. And the only life they know is that life of victimization. So they tend to just subject themselves and say, it is what it is, and this is who I'm gonna be. And
Right.
so that trauma that is caused within the
Many
psyche of
layers.
those young, layers and layers. So it's just not, liberating someone from slavery and taking them back to the community and say, here's your daughter, here's your son, because chances are they will not be treated, like the prodigal son was treated, you know.
Right. Right.
So
And I
and those of us who are trying to stand in the gap needs to understand the different nuances of both sides.
right.
Life being enslaved and life after enslavement. What does it look like? For the victim.
Yes, and thank you very much for pushing that envelope, if you will, and so that actually was is a good response to one of the myths that was mentioned at the top of the broadcast, which had to do with the easy thing is to take the person out and then return them home. Eh, Even though it's a tough situation, it's similar to being in a domestic violence situation, which this is. It's a violation on the person, and it could be within the home, and so we'll probably talk about that as well. The easy thing is, oh, just get out. No, 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 because where I may go next, I may not be received, and so this is just another. It's under another name. It's under another scenario, but the essential situation is the same. It and sorry to say, it's like the devil that you know is sometimes better than the devil that you don't know. At least I know. I may not necessarily be able to regulate or to let's say, liberate my own self, but at least I know what I'm expecting here. But when I go home thinking that it's like a person who's been in prison. They go back home, they return to their home, and not many people receive them or know how to treat them, or they are so set in the expectations of when they were within the institution that they don't necessarily know how to operate outside of the institution. So, and
And before anyone get a sense of misunderstanding, we are not suggesting
right,
that we should not liberate, these persons, even if they have to go back to face another form of retribution. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying, that those of us who are committed to creating this transformation, we need to understand that just sticking them from, it's like back home. I don't know whether you guys use this expression here, but back in Liberia, we always say sometimes you take someone from the frying pan and
into
put
the
them into
fire.
the fire. And
Yes,
so sometimes that is the example. But just because that might be the case doesn't mean we leave them in the frying pan. What we try to do is understand that there is a transitional moment, all right, that has to happen within the life of that individual. And sometimes it requires us to work with the community in order to receive them. So it's just not taking them and turning them back and say, here's your daughter, here's your son. But how do we prepare? It's like trying to plant seeds. You have to till the soil, you have to fertilize the soil, you have to ensure that the seed that you're putting in that the soil is ready to receive it. And I'm pushing us to understand that it's just not liberating those who have been enslaved, but also preparing the community for which they have to return. So that's the point we're trying to make.
correct. Excellent. And with that, and this is what Lot Carey is doing, and that is creating those, just to say the layered effect is not enough, but preparing the home community to receive, and in this particular situation, preparing the church community, preparing the clergy, preparing the let's say the social services within the pews, right, to receive, to connect to the social services outside of the buildings, to connect on restorative conversations and environments, so that when the person does come back in, how do we in the church see them? Not that we have to know the whole story, but how do we see them? How do we embrace them? How do we make space for them, their conversations, their concerns, and then connect them to resources that are available within their neighborhood and their community? Thank you. And thank you for the person who put this up. J, can I read it? JLIFIC, I think, for the Tamar campaign. If I'm reading it wrong, please forgive me. And then yes, this is why trauma-informed ministry is so important. Thank you very much. Yes, there is an internalized oppression. We were talking so much, I saw these comments later. And yes, it is truly imperative for us to create safe and sacred spaces. Thank you so much. Whoever this Facebook user is, please click on that link so I know how to identify you. It may be my stream team leader, but I'm not really sure. All right, let's go to the next question. Oh, actually, this is probably what we were just talking about. So in what way does trauma-informed ministry help us shape support services that do no harm? So we've just talked about that. That's preparing, again, the clergy, your diaconos, your support ministries, your women ministries, and realistically your men ministries, because again, it's not just women, it's men as well. Preparing your children's ministry or your youth ministries, because we don't necessarily, I know you're the leader. I'm just reiterating what we were just talking about. But preparing and having that clear conversation so that we are aware. We are aware. We may not have all the answers, or in having books that we've had in the Lot Carey Wise conversation about what trauma-informed ministry is. What do you want to add? Sorry, I know this is a conversation, but go ahead.
No. I think you cover the basis, and I think one of the ways to create that safe space is to deal with the matter before any member of your community becomes victim. Because I think if
Just
we're already preparing ourselves for it, then Unfortunately, if one of us were to fall victim to it, we already are. So we're not preparing ourselves for that individual, but we're preparing ourselves for life. Life happens,
Right.
and sometimes we are. Maybe we sometimes believe that this would never happen to us.
Mm,
We take that posture that this could never happen in my community, so there's no
can't
need
happen
to waste my time to deal with it. Let me deal with other stuff. But I think we see that every day we turn on the news or read the paper, however you get your news feed. You see some strange things that you never, you know. I'm sure all of us have watched the news and stuff happen in communities, and people will say there's always this one person who will say this. I never thought this could happen in my
here.
community.
Right. Excuse me. So
Oh,
for the record, we've watched the news over the last couple of hours, days, weeks, and seen a whole lot of things that we had no idea would happen in these United States or in this part of the United States or in the tri-state area or the Eastern Seaboard or in our neighborhood with like, wait, what's happening? So yes, I totally agree that we should have the conversation or broach the conversation. And I will say thank God for Lot Carey and thank God for the Lot Carey, wise soul group that has entered into delicate and tender conversations so that we start the conversation, as you said, start the conversation. Don't have to have everything laid out, but so that things don't smack you on the side of the face and you're just like, well, let me go run to the pastor because the pastor must have the answer. Not necessarily, but if the people can see what maybe the pastor is may not necessarily see, you can see the door before sometimes the pastor sees the door. And some people watch the door and see who's coming in and then can give a heads up to the leadership and say, just so you know, this is a new entity that we have walking in. How can we be prepared for it?
great.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at the next question. So, and this is again, now we're on to support systems. So, awareness, advocacy, and activism are essential to providing services for people victimized by human trafficking. How do you believe we can become better allies to this group? It's almost like we're asking new questions that we're really answering at the same time. Today, the mainstream belief amongst scientists is that race is a social construct without biological meaning used as an instrument of oppression that weaponizes skin color. So maybe let's focus on how can we be, not just aware, but advocate and be activists of providing services for people victimized. We probably just talked about it, but maybe a line about, let's say, preparation. Let's say I'm going to push the envelope here. We in Lockery Wise definitely have had these very humane and like in your face conversations about what do we do? How do we respond? What is our next step? And so because we are a group of Lock Carry the umbrella organization, I'm sure that we're going to have greater conversations about training, providing direct instruction, if you will, so that clergy can come or can start the conversation about like, here's a template, here's a skeleton, here's an outline of what we should look at. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think and I don't want to be misunderstood, but I think the church has perfected the art of responding. And I think we need to perfect the art of ensuring that what we respond to doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And I'm not up for just preparing myself to help victims. My call to us is for us to be advocates to stop it from happening. Because if all we do is to help victims, then we're going to be helping victims until Jesus comes back.
Hmm.
But the church while we should be about helping those who have been victimized, we should try to stop it before other people become victims to this crime. Let's call it for what it is. It is a crime against humanity. It is as worse as slavery 600 years ago. Right? And so while I do agree that we need to be advocates, against this crime against humanity, um, one of the things that I think I mentioned on the prayer call is that in addition to praying and rallying around, in fact, I think we need to take this to our lawmakers, those persons that we vote for ever so often, and let them know that this is our concern. See, politics is about interest. Make no mistake about it. Politics is about interest. And if we convey to our lawmakers that this issue is of interest to us, we elevate the conversation. How many times have you heard any of your elected leader campaign on this issue? When was the last time you heard any one of your elected leaders, from the current president in the White House to your state legislators, have you heard any one of them campaign on this issue? Because as far as they see, this issue is not a U.S. issue. This is not this domestic issue of these United States. And that's where they get it wrong, because I think I told you that way back in 2017, it was documented that human trafficking had affected every state within the union. Back in 2017, it's on record that every state in the union had someone behind bars or someone in some trauma center because of human trafficking. But yet, it has not become a political issue.
Right.
And I may not be an expert on U.S. politics. I didn't grow up here, but as the little I know, that politics in America is about issues. And as long as this is not on a list of issues,
Right.
we will keep having this conversation.
Amen to that. So I'm going to read some comments. So yes, human trafficking is happening around us every day. We must be aware. The conversation is making us aware so we can be prepared. Thank you, Facebook user. And thank you, Dr. Clifton. Like Harry is blessed and well-informed with well-informed membership, but it's our responsibility to share that info. We are blessed to be a blessing. The anti-trafficking initiative has been in place since 2007. I remember this from the morning meditation. Are you a Reuben? I took notes. And let me give another comment. So yes, thank you, Dr. Clifton. Yes, the Violence Against Women Act is underutilized. TIM, for those of you who are not aware, is Trauma Informed Ministry, helps us to be sensitive to the signs so we can stop it. So I actually want to halt there for a moment. So I'm an adult, you're an adult. We can have these conversations, even though they are still extremely difficult, because as you just said, it couldn't happen here, right? That's an international issue. It's not going to happen here. And then it happens. I'm also an educator by trade. And so there are the conversations, and this is going to be a little bit layered. There are the conversations that parents and their parents have with their children. Then within our community, we have slightly different conversations about how you walk on the street, how you need to respond to adults, to lawmakers, etc., or law enforcement. And then so that's families. Then there are, I'll say, families of color. And then there are families of color who are also Christian families. We have another conversation about how you need to move through streets. And this is not going to be a conversation about what you should be allowed to wear or what have you, but it is a conversation that, because it is creeping in, or people are becoming more aware of human trafficking, that not only when you go to the hospital should you be aware of what doctors are, what's happening to you in, on the table, what have you. So you should have an advocate, but you should have an advocate in your family to say that as you are moving through streets, be aware of these type of situations or these conversations or things that may people may be saying to you, or sort of like, getting you to sort of come here, or go on this, go to this space, or let's go to this event, or having a sip of something that you're not aware of, right? And then you wake up and other things are happening. And so I'm always tiptoeing with families, especially families who are who have middle schoolers and high schoolers, because when people say, "Oh, that won't happen here," we still have we have these Amber Alerts. Children are missing. We don't have the people on the milk carton anymore, at least not that I know of, but we have, on a regular basis, children are missing, and when they come back, they're not speaking. So somehow these conversations are, yes, in adult conversations, but gently and lovingly and with care and support, we are going to have to begin to embrace our younger people, not to scare them, but to have some straight conversations. Not necessarily to be delved into at this moment, but am I going to be a Reuben? I'm I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do my part. Okay. You just want to sit on that, right? Done.
Good one. No, you're fine.
Okay, let's go to another conversation. So I'm going to combine these two because they're connected. So can you share with us how you see the exploitation of plantation slavery fueling human trafficking? And then coupled with that, why do you believe modern day slavery is such a problem today, in spite of all we already know about the generational harm plantation slavery caused? So how is plantation slavery similar, connected, different from modern day slavery? And how is that connected to human trafficking?
Well, it's simple. Money. Money comes down to that. As long as certain things within societies produce money, people always go after it, whether it's illegal or not. I think I shared with you that the last statistics that was given, human trafficking yielded well over 32 billion, and that's with the B, well over 32 billion dollars in 2000, in the year 2000. I'm sorry, 2020, in the year 2020. 32 billion dollars, right? Go back in the history, plantation slave was about money. It was about using people to produce uh, money for slave masters. The only reason our African ancestors were brought here, they were brought here as laborers, slave laborers, to work at the expense of their very existence to make other people wealthy. All right, it's about money. It comes down to that, plain and simple. So there's no, we can twist it, we can nuance it, it comes down to money. As long as people are making money. It's the same way, the illegal drug industry, the same thing. It comes down to money. As long as people are making money, it will continue. So
Thank you.
historically, presently, and in the future. And that's why you have to cut it where it starts. Because if we don't, it perpetuates itself. It really does.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clifton. So if you go to HUD or HUD.gov, HUD.gov for more information, and the VAWA and the addendums. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sister Nancy Doswell, for saying that this is a deep and much needed conversation. We have an additional comment. Oh, actually, I typed this. Thank you, because I wasn't aware of that. So the human trafficking has generated $32 billion, or generated a $32 billion industry, and that wasn't in 2000, but just in like 3 years ago. Thank you, Facebook user. So, amen, Reverend Dunn. It's about the money. People can be sold and used over and over again. And here's another piece of information. Fair LearnToGrowU for information on capitalism and trafficking. Thank you so much.
And by the way, that is a very important website to go to.
Thank fairgirl.org.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that's why I try to pull them up so we have more information. So here's our last, we're sort of wrapping up. So how has the issue of vulnerability fueled modern day slavery, and why should everyone be concerned? Gender based violence is the umbrella term for violence directed at an individual because of their gender or biological sex. It's rooted in gender inequality and can affect individuals of all sexes and genders. Human trafficking is a form of gender based violence. So here's the last and most tenuous question. So how can you, oh, excuse me, can you share with us how you believe the intersectionality of socially constructed concepts like race, poverty, and I'll put in gender, has been perpetuated by the dominant class historically and continues to fuel gender based violence today? So, how does the intersectionality of all of these social constructs, but poverty, I guess, can be debated, is that a social construct? How is it fueling gender based violence today?
First thing, I don't believe that race and poverty are social constructs.
Okay.
Those are reality of life. You know, uh, I think the dominant culture would like to make us think that is a social construct, because by saying that it it is somehow justifies the injustice that continue to plague our societies. Um, when someone tell you that race is a social construct, it flies in the face of reasoning, right? And it's the same way. In order for them to justify slavery, they had to create in the minds that blacks were subhumans because of the inhumanity that was levied against our ancestors. So they sat around the dining tables at night, not feeling guilty because they were not treating human beings inhumanely. They were treating subhumans. The oppressor will always find a reason to justify their behavior, always. And so today, um, the dominant culture in this country blame teenage pregnancy on
Hmm.
the welfare system. They blame um, mental illness on the absence of male in the lives of these young people. People will always find a reason not to take responsibility. And when they do, we ought to be grateful because they don't have to do it. And I think it's about time we just tell people the truth, right? That we would not be where we are, but for the greed of, you know, wealth. We live in a very um, greedy society in these United States, that people do not stop to think about the well-being of those on whom they step to gain what they get. And so let's circle back to the whole subject matter at hand, human trafficking. We talk about the vulnerabilities of those persons who find themselves in such situations. And here's part of the reason: there's a good percentage of persons, especially girls that find themselves in this situation not because they were forced into it per se, but they were tricked into it. When you are growing up in a poor community, poverty stricken, and someone comes and show you a way out, a legal way out, may I say, chances are you're going to take it because you're looking out for a better life, only to find that the stories that you were told of a better life in City X
Mhm.
turned out to be a life of abuse into sexual slavery.
Let's call it what it is, a life of hell.
So it's not always people being captured and tied up and smuggled into that. But for the most part, people are talked into what they believe to be a better life. And so they enter into that space with that individual or individuals only to find out that it's a syndicate. Right? But what caused that vulnerability is not innocence, it's poverty. It's not innocence, it's poverty. They agreed to go with that person knowing that they were trying to make their lives better, to work, what we call to earn whatever they were to receive legally. They were not told that they were going to be sold into sexual slavery. No.
Right.
They told that they were going to be gainfully employed,
Right.
only to find themselves captive. Right? So when we speak of human trafficking, we cannot, it's not one size fit all. But at the end of the day, whether they were tricked into it, whether they were forced into it, whether they stumbled into it, it is still a crime against humanity. And we need to do all we can to keep this conversation in the forefront of our ministries. In the this conversation is just as important as saying to someone that they need Christ in their life. Right? It's because it's a gospel that needs to be preached in this day and age, as we would call it, in 2023. There's no reason why we should be talking about slavery. There's no reason why we should be talking about slavery. And right now, it is estimated there are more people in modern day slavery today, on this modern Thursday, 2023, than all of our ancestors put together 400 years ago.
That's a tough pill to swallow. That is a tough pill to swallow.
Just because they're not on plantation picking cotton doesn't mean it's not slavery.
Right. 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 Um, I'm gonna
I
pull.
want to thank Wise for uh, highlighting this conversation, and I think it's something that will continue. It's just not an annual theme, but it continues all along, um, uh, so that it is preached from every pulpit, it is taught from every seminary classroom, and it is trumpeted from every boardroom. And until that is done, we cannot be said. We should not be satisfied.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Let me I was so deep in the conversation. We had all these comments. I definitely want to give a moment for them. So thank you, Sister Nancy. There is no justification for injustice. Thank you so much. To this person, the oppressor will always find a reason to justify their behavior. Yes, during these conversations, please, if you hear something that becomes like an aha moment or an amen moment, please like put it into the chat so that we know that something that is said. And sometimes things are scripted and they are scripted conversations or scripted questions, but sometimes things just flow and we may not necessarily know how that may touch or pinch the heart and the mind of those who are listening. So please drop it in the comments. So here's another comment. Dr. Clifton, the scarcity instead of abundance mindset is oppressive and exacerbates issues that divide us. It makes it possible to make people a means to an end, and human trafficking is the byproduct. Thank you. Yes, yeah. So these are the people are lured away with an elaborate grooming process. Yes, this isn't something like we're just taking any person and sort of as they are sent to do work, whatever that work is, or to sacrifice part of themselves, but they are pruned and groomed for the situation. That just came to me. Okay. Oh, look at that. They were groomed into it. Didn't even see that. Yes, it is unbelievable and horrific. And here's our last comment. So thank you, Reverend Dunn, for sharing your wisdom with us. We appreciate you. It would behoove me to mention that in a month, in 6 weeks, we are going to have the Jumping for Justice. This is our second time doing this, second time having this anti-human trafficking Jumping for Justice experience. Just don't get hurt in the process. Just for those of you who know, you know what I'm talking about. But you will see on Lot Carry TV, you will see on lotcarry.org, you will see in the Lot Carry Wise Salt Facebook group, you'll see on my platform, Jumping for Justice, where people, women and men, are getting together and having some fun, jumping some old school rope, but engaging in that activity in order to not only raise awareness, but to raise funds as well, and to raise community support around another opportunity to raise community support for anti-human trafficking and for this tender topic. And so we invite you. You will see more information about it in the next couple of days and weeks on many platforms. Those of you who are aware, if your church is not already aware, or maybe your community of friends, maybe if you have youth groups that want to make sure that people are safe. If you say nothing else to young people, this is an opportunity to make sure that people are safe. And if that is the central message, before you add on the other layers of race and gender and so forth, children understand that they want their friends to be safe. They understand that they want to be safe, and that there's a community of people who are rallying around to make sure that they are safe. And if that is the central message, let's get that message out there. So you will see Jumping Number 4 Justice. You will see it on all platforms. And we want to thank our Executive Secretary Treasurer, the Reverend Emmett L. Dunn, who is the president, who is the leader of Lot Carry. We want to thank you for resting with us tonight on this Monday, Thursday. Some people have other events to go to, and we want to make sure that happens. We bless you. We thankfully look forward to your continued leadership, and we will see you in another couple of days and weeks, depending on what's happening in the next couple of days and weeks. Hold on. And if you're not able to come, Dr. Clifton says, have a watch party on 5/13, which is such a special day, I must say, so that we can increase the knowledge base. Thank you all to those who have joined us in this conversation. If you are catching the end of it, please just go back to the very beginning when you will hear the 13 myths from Exodus Road on myths of human trafficking and the explanations of it. Please follow again lotcarry.org for more information about this. We look forward to seeing you on the next event. So join us on the first day of every month for the Lot Carry prayer call at 6:30 in the morning. And then you will find us here on the first Thursday of the month for the Lot Carry Wise Digital Couch Conversation. Reverend Dunn, do you want to say a final word?
Certainly. Just want to thank you for an excellent conversation. Thank my sister, Dr. Angelina Clifton, President for WISE, and all of the officers that, put all of this together. Um, this is just another way that the Carey family want to ensure that we just not about saving souls for heaven, but we're about making earth a wholesome society. And that's our call. That's part of our mandate. That's why we do what we do, because we are agents of transformation. All right. And yes, heaven awaits those who will get there. Um, and but you know, the model prayers say that God's will should be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I think sometimes we pay more attention to the heaven aspect of the prayer rather than the earthly aspect of the prayer. And as leaders within the Lacarian network, call and mandate is to ensure, all right, that people live wholesome lives here. And that's the reason for such conversation. So thank you again for having me come to share with you, and for all of those who have had the privilege of listening in on this conversation. I say to you, rejoice. The Lord is indeed with us. And may this Easter weekend be one of much, much joy, reminder, and reflection. Peace, everyone. God bless you.
Excellent. I need to see the shirt you're wearing. We have not given a shout out. I am Lot Carey.
Get
That,
yours now if you don't have it already. It's
that's
going with
right.
hotcakes.
That is our new hashtag, everyone. I am Lot Carey. Make sure that you tag that wherever you are on all social media platforms. So yes, and we are definitely transforming lives with, touching lives with transforming love. And to those who say thank you, we say thank you as well for showing up. Please, the next time that we're here, invite some other people. Again, we are on LotCarryTV.org, Lot Carey TV on YouTube, and then we're also here on the Lot Carey Wise Salt on Facebook. Invite others to pop in. You can share out the YouTube link to those people who are not on social media, because they need to hear this word, because they also should be touching lives with transforming love. Peace and blessings. We will see you on the next situation. All right. Good night, everyone.